Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Uplift. This week joining me is David Robertson, and he'll talk about the importance of defending life within the church. Thank you, David, for joining me in studio today.
It's a privilege.
Great. The first question I have for you is, often it can be described as too political by pastors talk about abortion in church. Why is it important to talk about humanity and life in church?
Yeah, that question always amazes me, because it would be political if you were, well, first of all, talking about it all the time. Secondly, in terms of party politics and so on. But it's about life. So I don't think these same pastors would say racism or refugees or famine were too political. So I think, children, babies in the womb, are the most vulnerable members of human society. And if we're Christians at all, then that has got to concern us. So the fact also the Bible mentions care for the unborn, I don't see how it's too political. I think it impacts politics and affects politics enormously. But I'm afraid that too many churches have steered away from it.
Yeah. Said silent on it. Yeah. Why do you think that many Christian men and women struggle to make a pro-life choice?
Because we don't think about it, and because I think that where we have a real difficulty is we get fed in the narrative of our culture, so we swim in the cultural seas around us, and the minute you mention abortion, they're going to say, what about women's rights? Or what about somebody who was raped by their father and becomes pregnant? You get the most extreme things, and people think, well, so because they don't think, they then think, hey, to be compassionate, and also there's so much anger about this issue. So I think a lot of people don't know how to do it. I think the work of SPUC and others in helping people think through this issue is really helpful.
How can we empathize then with those people with truth and grace if they find it difficult to voice their pro-life opinion? So
you're saying basically Christians who find it difficult? Well, I think you can empathize a lot, because it's quite a hostile environment in that regard. However, there are a significant number of people who, my view is, they're completely persuadable on this. So, for example, if I showed a picture of a 12-week-old baby in the womb, and I said to any human being, is that a human baby or not? They're going to say yes. The next logical step is, well, if you're killing that, you're killing a human baby, aren't you? And I think that I think we can do that. I think you empathize with people partly by just simply saying, look, you're not meant to have this whole argument yourself. It also depends who you're talking with. And I would say if churches had a much stronger position as churches, and if people knew your own work, then they'd be able to point people to. So some of the pro-life websites are absolutely excellent.
Yeah, we have tremendous resources around us. We're best. And how, when you're teaching on the sanctity of life in church, and you may have women in your congregation or in different churches who are wrestling with the aftermath of abortion, how can we serve them? How would you serve them and look after them? How does God view them? How does he respond to them?
Well, I think it's the same with anybody else. So I regard everyone in church as being the same. In other words, we're all sinners. And there may be somebody there, in fact, there almost inevitably will be somebody who's had an abortion. Particularly, in the congregations where I've been. But there may be somebody who's committed murder. There may be somebody there are people who have committed adultery. There are people who, there are all different kinds of, when I talk about domestic violence or sexual abuse, there will be people who've experienced these things. So what I want to do is I want to point people to, yes, I want them to be aware of the harm and the wrongness, but I also want them to be aware. I'm not there primarily to speak about people's sins and abortion. I'm there to point people to Christ. And that's the most amazing thing I've seen. I've seen people who have come to a recognition of what they felt within themselves, that the abortion they had was wrong, but then to see the forgiveness that comes through Christ is an absolutely wonderful thing.
Wow, yes, tremendous.
So I'm not there to say you have committed the unforgivable sin. That's not what abortion is.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is we get emotionally bullied into saying, well, because someone might feel bad about this, we should say nothing. Well, in that case, you'd say nothing about anything. I'll tell you a story. I once was meant to go on to BBC Radio Scotland, right? And so they wanted me to do Thought for the Day. And I said, yeah, I'll just pop in the studio in Dundee. And they said, no, write out a script. I said, don't you trust me? I said, no, everyone writes a script. So I wrote out a script. And they got back in touch with me, and the producer said, you can't say that. I said, what? I said, Britain's Christian values. I said, well, it's true. The values on which the nation was founded. And he says, yes, but it might offend people. I said, there's 250,000 people who listen to your programme, supposedly. You really want me to speak to 250,000 people without offending anybody? I said, I can't even talk to myself without offending somebody. And I just think that we don't go out to offend people, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to proclaim, Paul puts it in Ephesians, you tell the truth in love.
Yes.
So that's what you're trying to do. There's a holistic picture of everyone involved.
Of course. And how can we then take the pro-life advocacy that's happening in the church, how can we bring that into the community?
Well, I know this, some people this might sound strange. First of all, I think we have to support those mothers, particularly young mothers, who maybe have children that they don't have a big enough support network. I remember being very cynical about the American anti-abortion people because I had all the caricatures of our culture, they go around bombing clinics and stuff, which wasn't true. There were a couple of extremists. But when I went over to the States, I was so surprised at how much support they gave both to young mums, but also to women who'd had abortions. And I just thought, well, so the first thing for me is practical. The second thing is that, we need to show that we care for all of life. And then I would also say that the rational philosophical arguments that we put forward, so we celebrate life. I think we are increasingly in Scotland moving into a culture of death. And we've got to go the opposite way. We've got to celebrate life.
And do you think that pastors in churches are equipped with this knowledge that we need to celebrate life?
They should be.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah.
I think there are some people who do an exceptional job with that.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think there are a lot of pastors who are a bit scared.
Yeah.
There are some who bought into the cultural narrative far too much. And we should be equipped. I mean, again, I'm coming back because I still do benefit a lot from SPUC's work and the information I get. And there's the guy, for example, I mentioned one guy, Callum Millard. Do you know of him down in Oxford?
Yeah.
I just think he's genius. He's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant. So putting forward the research that he does. So for example, I wrote an article for Christian Today on abortion in Malawi.
Oh.
And Callum Miller had done all the proper research. And basically he's demonstrated that when abortion is restricted in the country, it doesn't increase the number of backroom abortions.
Yeah.
And I just found, so work like that is really, really important.
Yeah, it's pivotal really, isn't it? In the case of, rape, this is one of the biggest things that we get asked. I get asked, everyone gets asked. How can we preach the truth in love in that situation for women who find themselves in a traumatic circumstance such as rape?
Okay, so it depends what people are doing when they bring that question. So often people are bringing the question as a philosophical argument.
Yeah.
So if someone's doing that, I say, okay, first of all, I want to park that and I want to say, what about the 99% of abortions that are nothing to do with rape or incest? Okay. Let's talk about them first. And then we come on to the more difficult cases. And I would do it that way. On the other hand, if the person sitting in front of me is someone who's been raped, that's a different question. So, rape is always horrendous and wrong. But I would talk about a woman in Australia who is a refugee, raped numerous times as a refugee from Iraq before eventually arriving in Australia. She had a baby, all her family were killed. She was urged constantly, particularly by Western liberal aid workers, you have to have an abortion, you have to have an abortion. Now she is so grateful for her son. It's not the child's fault. You know, and I would just simply say to someone, maybe not, I would say, look, here's a 1-year-old child who is conceived through rape. Should that child be killed? No, why not? Because they're human. It's not the child's fault. Now, you support the rape victim. You do as much as you possibly can. But I think it's the idea that if you accept the baby as a human being, killing a human being is an answer to rape is just wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I'm making it sound very simple, and it's not, because every circumstance is entirely different. But I've met people who were conceived through rape and were so grateful that their mother didn't have them killed. Yeah. You know, and I've met women who their instinct was, in terms of rape, to say, right, let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then they thought, well, it's not an it. And then they've been immensely grateful that they didn't follow that through. So it's not just as simple as people go, well, it's rape, so therefore, end. You say, no. There's one sense in which there are no right choices in this, or no good, because the rape is the evil, but the birth of the child is not evil.
No. Yeah,
so
I agree. In terms of women who find themselves in crisis pregnancy, what about the men? You know, the role of fathers in that situation. If they were within your church, you know, in Sydney, Scotland here, what would you say to them? Or how can we support them as well?
Well, that's such an interesting question, because I always, it's quite funny because of the transgender stuff, I've suddenly found myself with a whole bunch of feminist friends. So, you know, I thought, okay, this is unusual for me to be on the same side as the feminists, but I am. But then sometimes I'll be sitting talking with some friends and they'll come up with about the abortion, and I say, well, hang on a minute. So the big argument is, I can do what I want with my own body. And I say, hang on, there's more than one body involved. And actually by that I mean there are 3 bodies involved. Because I'm the father, I have to look after my children. I'm involved in this. And I remember one instance, doesn't matter where, but where a young man came to see me and he said, David, my girlfriend's pregnant, she's going to have an abortion and I want you to stop her. I said, oh yeah, right, I can't do that. You know, that's not. But he said, her parents go to church, and he said, can you please do something? I don't want my child killed. So I went to speak to her with a friend, a colleague, and she was first of all angry that he'd said that. And then I said, well, hang on a minute, he is involved here as well. So I said, and this is confidential. I said, why do you want an abortion? And she said, because my parents are very religious and they're going to be mad. And I said, okay, so I tell you what if I went with your parents' minister to talk with your parents about this? You came with us. Yeah. I said, because I have a suspicion you've probably got your parents wrong on this one. So she said, yeah, let's do that. I'd like to do that. Let's do that. So we went, and I'll never forget that meeting, because the parents just looked at her and went over and gave her a big hug. And said, you know, we'll support you and care for you. And I remember 18 years later walking down the street and meeting a young man, and he was that baby. Wow. And I thought, wow. And I thought, good for the father for taking responsibility. Because the one thing that people don't mention so much, an awful lot of abortions happen because of coercion of men who don't want any responsibility. And, you know, they really, I mean, it's funny how people talk about that coercion. And, I mean, I'd read someone called Lyle Shelton in Australia saying that men coercing women to have abortions is actually legal. I'm going, what? That cannot be right. But it happens here in Scotland. Get an abortion. I don't know how many women I've spoken to, that's what their boyfriend, even husband, said, get an abortion, get an abortion. I remember one woman who was just 30 years later was continually depressed because she was forced by her boyfriend to have an abortion.
Yeah, there's a knock-on effect. Yeah.
And there's a knock-on effect that goes on for... So it's funny because people go, abortion is a women's issue. No, it's not. It's a human issue, and men should be involved in that. I accept that women are more involved because women have the harder job of carrying the child.
Of course, yeah.
And, you know, the birth is obviously much... But men are still involved and must be involved.
Yeah.
And I despair of my own gender, how we opt out of stuff like this, or take the wrong choice, or don't want to take responsibility. And we have to take responsibility. You know, so for me, it's a really, really crucial question.
I have read your article on TikTok about TikTok evangelism.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you know, but we have a TikTok account.
Oh, right.
William
I didn't know that. Okay.
William, my colleague William and I run it.
Do you dance?
I dance. William doesn't dance. I dance. He's not here now. Not yet. We could suggest it to him. Yeah. But there are actually a lot of pro-choice pastors on it.
Yeah.
And you know, how important is it for people to defend life and be pro-life on these like social media sites? You know, how can we get people to listen?
Well, it's the drip, drip, drip effect. So I would argue that so yes, I mean, it's funny on TikTok. TikTok must have worked out by their algorithm that I was interested because I've started seeing some of these pro-choice, not necessarily pastors. I mean, there's one just now of an interview of an American by the Senate where this woman admits that partial birth abortion, by her philosophy, the child should be allowed to be killed. And I'm going, that's just barbaric. It's absolutely barbaric. But it's very effective having that in a 60-second TikTok thing, you know. Personally, I hate TikTok, but I feel we have to use it. I feel that it can provoke people into deeper investigation. So I think it's good for you guys to be involved. I would always say with TikTok, you should make one point and make it well.
Make it well.
Yeah.
That's good advice, yes.
And then you repeat it.
Yeah, over and over.
You know, and sometimes also with TikTok, it's quite good. You can do a vox pop. What do you think about this? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a extremely good way as well of getting people's attention.
Yeah, and then responding to it. So the danger with TikTok is you end up as part of the soundbite culture.
Yeah.
But the advantage of TikTok is far more people use it than, say, Twitter.
Currently now, there's a lot more people on it. Thank you, David, for coming into the studio, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to answer my questions and for passing on your wisdom. I really do appreciate it, and I'm sure many of our viewers will enjoy it as well. And you can follow David on Twitter and check out his website as well, theweefly.com. And we'll link everything below for you to find out more information about David and his work in Sydney.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege. The questions were great. I don't really have that much wisdom, but I just think out loud. And I would love it. and I would encourage all those who are, you know, you don't have to have the answer for everything. Just do the wee bit that you can. You know, just do the wee bit that you can. It's one time I remember. Sorry, this is just going about. We had a single mums unit across from the church. And I remember one time a 16-year-old girl came in, and you know, she had her baby and everything, and I was just so delighted to see the way that people welcomed her. And didn't ask questions, didn't condemn her, didn't. No. And I just thought it was lovely for her to be able to come into an environment which is a genuinely accepting and inclusive environment. You know, and I think that's what we should have. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. So thanks everyone, and we will see you again next week. Thank you.